So we welcome the New York, a Hall of Famer who knows a thing or two, I think, about a soon-to-be Hall of Famer. That's Kurt Warner, who knows a thing or two about a guy he had for a year with the Giants, Eli Manning. So, Kurt, your Hall of Fame career is with the Rams and with the Cardinals. Now, you had a winning record with the Giants.
Yeah.
It was an unfair position that you were in, but the team goes and drafts Eli with the first pick.
Yeah.
You're around him that first year. What was the takeaway seeing this young Manning offspring? Did you ever think, hey, this guy might be destined for Canton?
I mean, just knowing the pedigree, you knew what was inside, what he was capable of. I don't think anybody saw it the first year. I mean, obviously, if you remember back to that year, once he took over, I think we went 1-6 down the stretch. There were times that he looked a little bit overwhelmed,
shell-shocked
by the situation. But again, that's part of the deal when you're a young guy. And then I think on top of that, the expectation. Not only is he playing in New York, but the expectation, because you got a brother that's Peyton Manning, and you've got a dad that's Archie Manning. And so I think there's a lot of things that go into it. I think the one thing that I loved about Eli, even in that early stage, even when things weren't going well, was that he was never rattled. You never saw him get out of sorts. You never saw him, waver in how he prepared and how he went about his job. You never saw him lose confidence when he went through some of those struggles. And those things, to me, are really what defined Eli throughout his career, is that he was so calm in the moment. He played so well in the biggest moments of his career. And a big part of that was just because his demeanor was always steady. And I think if you're in New York, and you're not steady, you're not going to last very long.
Got to deal with guys like me. Not fun.
But to understand, the ups and downs of it, and to be able to continue to battle through that, and then obviously, as I said, those 2 Super Bowl runs, played his best football in the biggest moments.
So for you personally, St. Louis, you're an MVP, you win a Super Bowl, it's this amazing story. Then you come to the Giants, and it's just an awkward situation for you, Kurt, because hey, Eli Manning's sitting there. He's the #1 overall pick.
Yeah.
His time is eventually coming. They make that switch. You guys have a winning record. For you, was that the toughest part of your career, just saying, hey, what could I have possibly have done?
It actually wasn't the toughest part, because when I went there, I knew that it was a matter of time. I was hoping I could hold them off for 16 games and play the entire season. But the blessing of it was I got to play again, and it parlayed, my situation into an opportunity with Arizona, which was really what I was looking for. I think the hardest part for me was the fact of how we played football that year offensively. Not, that I got benched, because I think a big part of it was they weren't really letting me play football the way I played football and the way I was capable of playing football. So when I did get benched after 9 games, that was the frustrating part. Like, I know I'm so much better than I'm kind of allowed to play here, because we were 3 yards in a cloud of dust and make a play on 3rd down, and we're a defensive. So that was kind of the hard part of that. It was, I didn't know if it was going to turn into another opportunity, but I went from the greatest show on turf, to be playing, in New York, where we were scoring 17 points a game and we were throwing the ball for 150 yards. And that was the hard part, because you just know what you're capable of and what you believe you can bring to the team. And you just wasn't able to do that there.
So you go to Arizona. I think you play in one of the best Super Bowls I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So in college, Steelers and Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald, James Harrison. I know it's a memory. Listen, you won, so it's a little maybe easier to digest.
Yeah.
That game was unreal. Your Arizona tenure, to me, put you over the top for the Hall of Fame. Do you feel that? Like, obviously, what you did in St. Louis, your record-setting, greatest show on turf, all those studs, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, you name it. But going to Arizona and being with Larry Fitzgerald and having that partnership with Anquan Boldin, do you kind of think that put your career and, put it on the perfect, cap?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any question. I think, there's a couple ways to look at it, is that, I was able to play as well as I did at the end of my career, like I did at the beginning of the career. Obviously, I had a shortened career because I didn't get, I didn't start until I was 28 years old. So you knew it was always going to be shorter than other guys. So you kind of had to make statements with, the 2 different, organizations that I was with, or the 2 different phases of my career. And I do. I think, people always say, can you write the history of the NFL without a certain player? And that's kind of what puts a guy, in that kind of Hall of Fame conversation. And what I'm most proud of is when, I got to St. Louis. We played in the third game of that year against Cincinnati Bengals. And the headline going into that game was, whoever loses this game is going to be the losingest team of the 90s. So for the last decade, we were one of the losingest teams in the NFL. And then to do what we did in St. Louis and become what we did and go to 2 Super Bowls was kind of the start of things. Then when I went to Arizona was the losingest team of the last 5 decades. So, for the last 50 years, nobody had lost more games than the Arizona Cardinals. And so to be able to be a part of changing the culture there and changing the perception there of Arizona, I think those 2 things, beyond just the play, had a lot to do with why I got into the Hall of Fame, was the ability to kind of rewrite those chapters or what those organizations were all about. Because I believe so much the quarterback position is about leadership. It's about instilling a belief, and it's about, finding ways to win in situations where, maybe they hadn't won in the past. And so the success in both places, I think, was key. But to be able to lead those teams to places where they hadn't been before, I think was a big part of my case of getting into Canton.
You mentioned quarterbacks. You know the position well. Giants are in the market for another one. I'm watching these playoff games, Kurt, and listen, I go back to watching you. I'm a Dolphin fan. I go back to watching Dan Marino sling it in the 90s. Like, this is my childhood. Now you see the modern-day quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Like, the Giants, as they get ready to draft their next quarterback or find their next quarterback, is it to a point now where you have to have that sense of mobility? Because to me, if you don't have it, it feels like if you're calling plays and you're on offense, you're missing this ingredient that's so, helpful for these other teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line is whoever you get has got to be good enough at what they do to be a winner in the NFL. And I don't think there's only one way to do it. I think what happens is we get so skewed one way or another to go, back when it was all about being a pocket passer. Like, if you can't do this, you can't be successful. So, we didn't have very many athletic quarterbacks in the league. And I think the bottom line then was we didn't have an athletic quarterback that could kind of transcend things to elevate you, to Super Bowl status. I think it's the same now, but just in the opposite direction, is that if you know how to play the game inside the pocket, there's benefits that gives you that, somebody that doesn't can't give you. And so we get skewed to go, oh my gosh, look what this guy did. They brought a blitz and they didn't have an answer, so this guy ran around and made a play. Well, I'd look back and go, well, if they bring a blitz, I'll just beat it with a throw and I'll have the same kind of positive play if you can do that. But you've got to be able to do that. So I think we just get skewed because we see so many athletic quarterbacks now going, oh man, you can't win without that element or without this element. We're not seeing as many great pocket passers now, but I do believe you can still win that way if you're a great pocket passer. But you got to be great at it. You got to be a great athletic quarterback. You got to be a great pocket passer if you're going to find your way into big games like this. But I believe there is a market for both if you're good enough at what you do.
You were able to thrive at the end of your career. Aaron Rodgers comes off the Achilles, plays 17 games, Kurt, in New York. Yeah. I'm like, if he plays 17 games, the Jets are going to have a winning record. Right. They're going to be a really good team. They went 5-12. Yeah. So now here we are, new coach, new GM, little uncomfortability for Aaron. He's still, in your opinion, the guy the Jets should move forward with next year?
I think a lot of it really depends on where you feel your team is, and what you want. I don't think it's ever bad to have a veteran quarterback when a new regime comes in, a veteran quarterback that knows it, that has been there, that can lead, and to me, Aaron and that team got better down the stretch as he got more comfortable coming off that Achilles. So you look at that and go, oh, okay, we can get that Aaron Rodgers or even a better Aaron Rodgers. But I think a lot of it depends because, new coach, a first-time head coach coming in, you got to be able to figure out that balance. And, when you got an Aaron Rodgers, if it's not going well, can you go to the young guy? Can you make the move that's best for the team like the Giants did with me and Eli? I think those things are so important when you're building a franchise and you're trying to change the complexion of things. So I think it would be great to have Aaron there and have a young guy there, but can you really do whatever it is you feel that's best for the team, like going to Eli Manning, going to your young quarterback? I know Tom Coughlin, when he made the move, it's not because Eli's better than Kurt. It's because we're trying to build for the future. And when our future is ready, we want our quarterback ready. If you have Aaron Rodgers, a future Hall of Famer, in that room, can you make that move if you're Aaron Glenn? Can you feel comfortable doing that? So I think those are the kind of questions that you ask. Not that you don't want Aaron Rodgers, but with Aaron Rodgers there, can you do the things that you want to do to build for the future?
So when you're doing these games for Westwood One and you're sitting there on Sunday doing the NFL Network stuff, who's the quarterback when Kurt Warner watches? He's like, reminds me a little bit of myself. Is there one where, like, obviously we know all the studs are, but is there one guy you watch and you go, I see a little Kurt Warner in him?
I mean, if there's one guy, I would probably say Joe Burrow.
Love Joe Burrow.
He's the guy that plays on time. He sees it, tremendous accuracy, you know, not the most physically talented of the guys we have in the league. So I think a lot of those things kind of connect with, but I love the way he thinks the game. You know, he thinks and processes so fast. That's what I always believe was my favorite, or my greatest strength. And so, you know, those are the guys that I love watching. I love watching Patrick and Lamar and Josh, although they're a little bit different than obviously the way that I played. So I appreciate the way they play. But when I see a guy like you're talking about, I think Joe Burrow, without any movement, can go out and win in the National Football League as a drop-back passer.
Hey, because Kurt's the only guy who beat Patrick Mahomes in the AFC.
Right.
He's the only guy to do it.
Well, but he does it, and he does it consistently, and he plays at a high level. And so I think there's an appreciation that I have for what he does, because it is a little different than a lot of the guys in the league right now. But it's very similar to how I believe you have to win in this game is understanding and playing in the pocket. But it's similar to what I did.
Final one. You played in like 3 of the greatest Super Bowls ever. Now, you got the win. Kevin Dyson stopped at the 1-yard line.
Right.
Then, of course, what happened, starting
Sure.
If watching that Super Bowl with New England, if you would have told me, hey, the 14-point underdogs would go on and become the greatest dynasty that the NFL's ever seen, I was like, okay, ain't happening. And then Arizona, I mean, Hall of Fame career and be a part of those 3 games, pretty wild.
There's nothing better. I mean, now that I cover it, that's all I want every year, right, is give us a Super Bowl that's close, that comes down to great players having to make great plays at the end to determine history. I was involved with 3 Super Bowls that did exactly that, right? Kind of started Tom Brady's deal, Big Ben, Santonio, on top of us taking the lead, and then obviously what we were able to do in our first one. So that to me is what the Super Bowl is all about. I want to see the 2 best teams. I want to see the greatest players play their best football, and I want to see it come down to somebody having to make that play in the end.
Kurt Warner, NFL Network, Westwood One, Bolden Young Quarterbacks, QB Confidential. Thanks for a few minutes, man.
You got it. Thanks a lot, guys.